Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are going to be in for some Dark Elf on Vampire Count action. And in this match I really have two things I wanted to try. First and foremost, I've been getting a question recently with some of the man spam videos I've done with Empire where I just bring a horde of infantry, whether or not this sort of strat is viable for other factions as well, and whether or not you can get away with massive infantry for somebody like Dark Elf. So that was one thing I was a bit curious about. The other thing, kind of in response to a lot of what I've been seeing, a lot of people arguing it's almost impossible or not viable to play with, well, all the default units. That DLC is mandatory, or you almost have to play with DLC to be able to make competitive lists. And I think there's some truth to it, certainly. Certainly DLC helps, and claiming otherwise I think would just be disingenuous. But I definitely think it's more than possible to make viable compositions without DLC units, and it's been something I've been experimenting with a good bit, and it's something we're going to see a little bit here. So going over the build here with Dark Elves, as you can see, no Regiments of Renown, no DLC units here, and we are definitely going for a bit of a man-spammy build, though I think with Dark Elves you can't commit quite so heavily to infantry as Empire can, because your infantry just ain't that cheap, so you gotta have a little bit of mobility. So starting off, my Lord Marathi, she is on foot. I think she's a great character to bring against counts. She's got bonus versus large, AP, she can self-heal with Soul Stealer, she has magic resistance as well as missile resistance, which makes her pretty resilient against attempts to snipe her with, say, Gaze of Nagash, or perhaps Spirit Leech. Very common sights on the battlefield, of course, from Vampire Counts, that sort of gimmicky play. So between heals and the resistances, she's pretty tanky against that. Of course, Enchanting Beauty and Heartrender Dark Shores debuff melee attack an extreme amount, and against counts who don't have very good melee attack to begin with on most of their troops, this is absolutely crippling. You can drop a lot of their units close to zero melee attack, if not outright zero melee attack. Besides that, she does deliver a little bit of magic damage. We've got Melkoth's Miasma, as well as, of course, Soul Stealer and the Wand of Kraydon, all very good tools to counteract ethereal units, because you do sometimes see these, and unless you go for a Fire Mage or Doomfire Warlocks, which themselves are pretty vulnerable to ethereal units, because most of their resistance is down to physical resistance. So unless you commit to one of those paths, you're going to have a rough time against units like Hex Wraiths. And usually I prefer a Firecaster, but I figured, you know what, let's try just Marathi. Let's see if we can get away with it. And so we are going to be rocking the OG Dark Elf Sorceress here, and see if we can make that Melkoth's Miasma and the Soul Stealer do the job. Now, besides that, for the main line, it is a mix of Dread Spears and Blackguard. Dread Spears will do a good enough job against most of the Vampire Count's troops. Obviously, they'll get overrun by Graveguard, but it does take a while because they've got very high melee defense, or I shouldn't say very high, but reasonably high melee defense. And then Blackguard or Nagaron will just beat the crap out of basically everything the Vampire Counts can put on the field as far as infantry is concerned. They've got very good melee defense, immunity to psychology, great leadership, just a very, very stable unit all around, and can really hold the line. So we got two of those, providing that extra bit of oomph, that extra staying power, and then a whole bunch of Dread Spears to soak up enemy charges and really deny the encirclement, because that's a big problem. If you're going for masses of shooting, you really need to deny your opponent potential to surround you and get into that backline. So we got to get as much chaff as we can. 4 units of Dark Shards are making up the bulk of our, or actually all of our missile play. We've got 4 units of them. These guys can shut down enemy Mortis Engines, big flyers. If my opponent had brought Terrorgeist or Dragon, these guys can really shut that down, shoot down Vargeists, Vargulfs, that sort of stuff. They're definitely there to counter those units, shoot them to death as quickly as possible. Even units like Chillgeists or units like that, Blood Knights, they can mass volley fire down, especially if they're snared by, say, Dread Spears or some of these cavalry units. And we did bring some cavalry here, 2 Dark Riders. These guys are actually the shielded variant. I just wanted that extra melee defense. And then we've got some Cold One Knights here on the periphery. And these guys will be providing a bit of extra staying power. They can mix it up with heavy cav. Certainly they won't win against Blood Knights or something, or Hex Wraiths for that matter, but they can bog them down, dish out a decent amount of hurt in the process. Now for my opponent here, he has gone with a very wide Vampire Count build. Not necessarily sure it's meta. You'll often see sort of Vargulf spam here, or you might see lots of cavalry. Of course, some of the major... One of the things to keep in mind, even though I did go with all vanilla units, I obviously didn't announce that to my opponent. My opponent isn't aware of that, so he does have to prepare for a variety of different Dark Elf strats. You got to be aware, of course, of Supreme Sorceresses trying to snipe you out with Fireball, and they're dirt cheap. You've got to be aware of Scourge Runners. And of course, Regiments of Renown, like the Raven Heralds, shooting away at you. So this build here, kind of lots of sort of trash to bog me down. Lots of skeletons, lots of zombies. Single unit of Sternsmen here in the center just to push the line forward to break my line at the key point. Mortis Engine to melt away my infantry. And then we do have quite the magical force in support. We've got Chillgeist on this end. We've got some Blood Knights on this end. These guys can definitely dominate the cav battle. These guys are supported here by a Necromancer who's only there really for the Winds of Magic. He's got Forbidden Rod and he's got his AoE heal, Master of the Undeath. This is actually a turn illegal build, I believe, though not entirely sure how it is with multiple casters nowadays. But we do have a Vampire of Shadows up in the skies. She is rocking Enfeebling Foe as well as Pit of Shades. Pit of Shades pretty nasty against blobbed up, say, Dark Shards or Blackguard. They can really melt them away. Enfeebling Foe, of course, great to help your Blood Knights or Hex Wraiths win a battle. Nekar Vampire Lord alongside her. He's got lots of Winds of Magic. And, of course, he's got some zombie summons, Nehek and Spirit Leech. So, as I mentioned, that's one of the nice things about Marathi. She's resistant to Spirit Leech sniping. Regardless, we're going to be pushing forward, taking advantage of the rocks here to provide a little bit of flank security. And as you can see here, I'm actually boxing up much more heavily. You can see I'm pulling back my Dread Spears, setting them up on the flanks. Ideally, I don't want to allow my opponent to get into the back line or allow him to get too close with his casters. I actually didn't check the Necromancer, didn't realize he didn't have any spells on him, but you don't want to let a Necromancer get close enough to cast those summons. As you can see, we're kind of sitting tight with the Dark Shards, letting my opponent come to me and repositioning our troops to really zone off enemy targets. Now, one of the nice things about Dark Riders is they're also great backline cleanup. They can help clean up zombies okay-ish, and they're really good against bats and hounds. If you see dire wolves or units like that, they can really clean them up very quickly. They're good charge bonus and okay weapon strength. Now I'm going to decide to push the battle here. We're actually going to push forward here with our Dread Spears. Of course, trying to get the Dread Spears in on the chaff, on the spears, and on the skeletons. My opponent trying to kite around a little bit with the Mortis Engine, but of course, already takes a volley from the Dark Shards, and that is just some really, really brutal stuff. This Mortis Engine will not last long at all under that fire. Over here, of course, zombies not going to last long against Red Spears. They're already racking up the kills. I do turn off Fire at Will because I don't want that friendly fire, but a Mortis Engine trying to push into the spears is just going to get pulverized. And a bit of a misplay here on my opponent's part. He is trying to converge in with his cavalry. You can see the Blood Knights coming in, the Hex Wraiths coming in. But while he's micros distracted there, the Mortis Engine is being shot to crap, and the Necrarch is not in position to drop some summons or drop some units on my backline. So that backline is just going at it. Mortis Engine here being melted. Isn't going to last much longer. And you can see here we're actually getting in on the Blood Knights, and I charge out because I just wanted to bog them down and dish out a little bit of hurt. You can see the Dark Riders there actually doing some decent damage, and my opponent pulls away rather than staying in that engagement. Now, beautiful Pit of Shades here, slip up on my micro there. Takes about a third or so of my Blackguard's HP. Actually a little over a third there. And you can see the attempt to snipe Marathia is going down, but of course Marathia with her high resistance is going to be pretty beefy. She's got rather respectable melee defense, and she's of course debuffing the enemy melee attack and defense here, so the Blackguard is going to swarm in and start shutting this crap down. Here in the backline, in the meantime, Chillgeist gets swarmed by my cavalry, so definitely a bit of a rough spot there. Now, they did great damage against these Cold One Knights, but we do still have Dark Riders in the pits there. We do still have these other Cold One Knights, and they are overwhelming this very expensive regiment around because the Necrarch's all the way out here, and he's focused on trying to keep himself alive. He's not able to provide support to these very expensive ghosts, and they are getting pulverized by just a crossfire of Dark Shards and Cold One Knights and all that stuff. Now, Skeletons here are getting into the back line. You can see the Dark Shards there taking a little bit of damage before crossfiring the hell out of the Necrarch. I kept trying to get Soul Stealers off, and unfortunately, my opponent was kind of lucking out a little bit there because the Soul Stealer kept getting canceled, and I'm not entirely sure why that was, but I just kept refusing to go off. You can see Soul Stealer there does go down, hitting the Vampire of Shadows as well. It does not actually pursue. I'm not entirely sure why it's showing it as pursuing the Necrarch Lord. Soul Stealer affects all units hit, and once it's slashed on, it will stay that way. Blood Knights do sneak past here, do get a bit of a surround and get in on my Dark Shards, so very well played there for my opponent. But my Dark Shards are already Benny Hilling away as the Cold Knights come back from pulping the Chillgeist. You can see the Chillgeist there getting overrun by Dark Riders. Honestly, Dark Riders not ideal against Chillgeist, but I figure at this point they can probably beat them down. They've got okay enough combat stats where the crappy stats on Chillgeist won't hold up. As you can see here, the Vampire of Shadows is doing her best to disrupt the backline. Another Pit of Shades is going down, but unfortunately I think it's doing more friendly fire than damage to my actual troops, hitting these zombies here. They're doing some damage to the Blackguard as well, but the Blackguard, they're just pulping the zombies as the Dark Shards fight their way clear. And because the Blood Knights are just so desperately trying to force their way in here, they are being torn to shreds by the Cold One Knights. And Cold One Knights, of course, is very, very brutal. They are getting pulverized a little bit here by the Enfeebling Foe, but Blood Knights are doomed at this point, down to 19 models and dropping quick. The Vampire of Shadows still doing rather well for herself, of course, taking advantage of hunger to steal all these dark shards, which don't stand a chance. Wasn't able to get a beat on her, really, but my opponent is definitely running up of time. Another Stole Stealer was supposed to go down. Once again, it gets cancelled, getting aborted there a little bit, so that kind of sucked, but we were definitely taking the edge here. Now, the Sternsmen here could have probably pushed through, and I think that's a bit of a misplay on my opponent's part, not pushing them through. But Blackguard, a bit bogged down here on Skeletons. Once again, should fall back with the elites, I think, on both sides. But at this point, balance of power definitely very much in our favor. Of course, Murder's Prowess going off, and that's going to make my troops fight all the better. You can see that melee attack spiking dramatically, and yeah, they're not going to last much longer. Over here, the Necrarch gets hit by a Soul Stealer. They're just getting melted away. He's, of course, large, so Cold One Knight's having a field day. He's not a combat-oriented lord, really. At least by Vampire standards, he's going to get dragged down. Soul Stealer is going to finish him off, and of course, Necromancer's not long for this world either. That's really just going to leave the Vampire of Shadows and the Sternsmen against the world, essentially. And even though I'm forgotten about those Dark Riders, it is a bit of a massacre. You can just see a pile of bodies here as the Dark Elves continue sliding out. These Cold One Knights down to 5 models and still fighting. Just insanity. Marathi, of course, debuffing these troops very, very efficiently. Dropping us Melkoth's Miasma here on the Sternsmen. Obviously, it might seem a bit wasteful because they do regen, but I kind of figured, you know, might as well whittle them down a little bit. And you can see the crossfire pouring in now from the Dark Shards as Balance of Power shifts in my favor, and army losses kick in. So, close victory for the Dark Elves. Now, obviously, there were certain things that I think could have been done differently on my opponent's part. Certainly some few things that could have been done a bit differently on my part. I could have been a bit more cautious with some of my engagements, or a bit more on top of my micro. And that certainly could be said for my opponent here as well. But I do think this matchup highlighted a few things. One, I think Dark Elf infantry spam, especially against a faction like Vampire Counts, is doable. I think you'd probably be better off with a different lord than Marathi, or a secondary hero. How exactly I do that, I'm not sure, to be quite honest with you guys. I maybe cut down on the chevrons, on the dread spears, downgrade the Dark Riders to normal Dark Riders without shields, and maybe cut off Melkoth's Miasma just to get a Firecaster with Flaming Sword of Ruin in case your opponent commits very heavily to Ghost Play, because that is one thing that would really concern me here, is if Mad Dog here had committed super heavily to Ghost Play. Obviously, one unit of Shellgeist ain't going to cut it. Melkoth's Miasma and mass crossbows and lots of cavalry will put a stop to that nonsense. But if your opponent does bring, say, multiple Hex Wraiths or, say, Chillgeists and then 2 or 3 Cairn Wraiths, it can become an issue because this build doesn't really have the stopping power to put them in the dirt quickly. So that would be one consideration I'd make here. But I do think that the massive infantry is doable as Dark Elves, especially in specific matchups. Now, that said, of course, there were some misplays here. I let my Blackguard get hit by a very brutal Pit of Shades. Obviously didn't take models, but did a lot of damage. Was a bit sloppy on my reaction time there. Let my Cold Knights kind of run amok chasing after the Hex Race when they really should have been closer and dealt with the Blood Knights a little faster. But I think those were really the main misplays for myself. And for my opponent, I think he had really one big major misplay, and that was not getting in there fast enough with the Necrarch to drop summons on my Dark Shards and shut them down, at least shut one unit down quickly. Because that meant that the Mortis Engine got shot to crap and put paid to that attempt there very, very quickly. Those Dark Shards, they do work. Don't mess with them. Now, I also am not sure the Necromancer was worth bringing in the format he was brought, because you are paying for a horde. When you bring him on a horde, if you bring him as a pure Winds of Magic battery, I think your best option is bring him on foot with nothing, because I believe he costs like 350 to 400-ish gold. Which, okay, that's all right, but when you're paying for a horse, you're only looking at a 600, 700 gold hero for really nothing. You're paying for a Forbidden Rod on a horse. That's kind of pointless, in my opinion. I think you could easily cut your costs there, cut some of these chevrons, get an extra unit of cavalry or direwolves or some Felbats on the field just to disrupt backlines a little bit better. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this sort of Mortis Engine infantry hero combo, but I think that if you're going for it, I do think these slight adjustments, either cut that Necromancer entirely or drop him to a foot character, and use that free up cash to maybe get more backline disrupt would be ideal. Otherwise, personally, what I prefer in this matchup certainly is to bring more mobility. I like my Vark Wolves in this matchup. I think they're pretty darn potent. You can commit to an air build, and from what I've understood, it is good to commit to air builds in this matchup to try to deal with the Dark Elves potentially sort of cheesing you out with their own air builds. But I would certainly consider going more mobile than this. I think the slow and steady infantry build will struggle when your opponent has Blackguard on the field. When your opponent might have Hargoneth Executioners or Witch Elves on the field, you'll oftentimes see those units and they will do a number on you. That's actually another improvement. I could have tried to squeeze in here some Witch Elves just to snare my opponent a little bit, but obviously that didn't happen. Regardless, game here to Mad Dog Mike. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. Found it entertaining to see some non-DLC Dark Elf action. I do think it's possible to make viable builds without DLC. Obviously, you're at a disadvantage, but keep in mind your opponent, unless you announce it to them and they trust you, your opponent does not know you don't have DLC. They have to prepare as if you may bring a DLC build, whether or not you do. And every faction has all the tools it needs to succeed. Even if you have to be a little more creative or a little more inventive, every faction has the tools it needs to succeed in its base roster. And don't get me wrong, it's obviously Regiments Renown, I think, and a lot of the new units are, if not overpowered, I don't think many of them are overpowered, but they do give you more options, and they give you more variety of builds. So don't get me wrong there. It absolutely is an advantage, and it is very beneficial to have your DLCs for a faction. However, you can still put up competitive lists, and you still can put up a fight and have more than a fighting chance in all your matchups without DLC. And I think that is worth keeping in mind. And I think this build here kind of demonstrates that there's no DLC here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed a little bit of that. As usual, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.